chatting, I told George that you're a competitive tennis player and that you're competitive as heck.
Are you a U.S. Navy graduate?
Look up there.
I didn't go to the Naval Academy, but I taught in the Navy after getting out of college.
I have been, one of my podcasts is with a Navy SEAL.
Oh, yes.
And
Crazy guys.
No, about 11 Navy SEAls. They scared the hell out of me.
Yep, they should.
I'm in a meeting. I'm with them. We're having a good time. I'm going, he could kill me in 8 seconds. And what's funny is I asked him once, I said, have you ever killed anybody with your bare hands? And he goes,
But basketball was actually my first love, but I'm 5'10" and a half. And so power forward in the NBA wasn't an option. So I played Division I college tennis.
got white skin too. I don't believe in white guys.
Yeah.
But competition is always incentive. Always lifts you up, makes you be aware.
So I did play a bunch of pickup ball. I went to Louisiana Tech and played a bunch of pickup ball with Karl when he was there, one of your nemesis. So, it was a small school. And so the team would come out to the intramural center and, during the summer and off season and, you'd play pickup, and Karl wasn't even your first guy you picked, because at that time he was just a big hoss. So you had to get the ball 5 feet from the basket. And in a pickup game, you wanted the guards or whatever that could handle the ball and shoot. But boy, he turned into a beast in the NBA.
Yeah, I could have drafted Karl Malone. I drafted a guy by the name of Keith Lee. I was an idiot.
Well, Karl, the difference. So I saw Karl right before the draft. And then about 4 months later, I saw him and I almost didn't recognize him because he had gone out to Dallas and worked with a guy that ran track at Louisiana Tech and turned his body from, with just a big country boy, big, strong, but didn't look like an athlete when you saw him, to ripped. And, he got where, and he scored a third of his points by beating the other power forward down the floor, which you wouldn't have realized from watching any game tape in college or even anything else, so you weren't the only one who kind of missed that.
No, I actually have a video of when he was a pro player and my son was coming out of college. Somehow I heard about Karl Malone's workouts and I asked him to send me one. So I have a tape somewhere in my boxes in my house that probably has an unbelievably difficult workout. Yep. He did a lot of hills, running hills and up and down hills, kind of like Jerry Rice did.
Right.
And he also had 25-pound weights, usually in his arms. He was an awful stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. He just worked hard at it.
Yeah. I hear he hangs on in Alaska a lot.
Yeah, he does a lot of hunting, but he lives in Ruston, Louisiana, where Louisiana Tech is.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. All right. We're going to start, gentlemen. It's 9 o'clock.
Okay.
So I'm put my game face on, introduce you, and then
let's have some fun, guys.
Let's have some fun.
And girls.
Welcome to American SEAL. My name is Sharif. I'm happy to meet you today from the home of George Karl here in Denver. And hello, Joel in Austin. How are you today?
Doing great, Sharif.
I am get the easy job today. I get to turn the interviewing over to Joel, and he and George will have some fun talking about some interesting topics. And I'll come back at the end to facilitate the Q&A. And so with that, Joel, I will turn it over to you.
Well, honored to have you with us today, Coach Karl. I've been an NBA fan all my life, so followed your career. So let's jump right into some of the tough questions. Let's say I, by some miracle, was appointed NBA head coach tomorrow of a team. What would be your advice from a priority perspective of how I think about approaching that job?
Wow, what a start with. Who's my best player?
Okay.
Talents do I have in my locker room? Are we fast? Are we slow? Can we shoot? Can we dribble? I think anytime when you come into a new place, simplifying is probably important. You don't want to complicate what they have with what you're bringing. So what I did it a couple times, and I thought I did it pretty well a couple times. I kind of took what I liked that was there, the fundamentals, the principles, maybe the philosophies a little bit, and I tried to incorporate them with maybe a couple priorities that I have. But I think it's important that when you come to a new company, you're at the reason you're coming there is you're there to change some things. I really think executives and coaches make a mistake by trying to change too much too quickly, and try to find the good that's there, try to magnify that, and then gradually bring in the change that you want to make. My last stint was in Sacramento. Unfortunately, the change I wanted to make is I wanted to get rid of their best player because he's a negative energy guy. And the owner didn't want to get rid of him, so he got rid of me.
Yeah, sometimes the best laid plans don't work. So you're coming into a new situation. That simplification, I think, is a word you use that I've begun to focus on, that really the great leaders take something that's complex and are able to make it simple for the organization. In basketball, what is that? How does that translate? How do you think about that?
Well, I think the one translation I see in business all the time is in coaching basketball, there are certain fundamentals of the game that I have a magnified intensity about. And I don't want the players to have any understanding except my understanding. And then there are circumstances in the game of basketball that you want them to feel like they're in a creative space or a space of versatility where they can think and come up and add to the party on their knowledge and their information and their thoughts. But I always think there's got every business and every basketball coach and every basketball team have a kind of a bunch of fundamentals, a couple maybe Bill Belichick, 3 on offense, 3 on defense, and 3 on special teams, something like that. For me, I hate the turnovers and I hate bad shots. And at the offensive end of the court, I don't like selfish players. At the defensive end of the court, do your job. In a defensive assignment, you basically have a role. It doesn't mean you're going to stop everybody every time, but know what your job is, know your responsibilities, and do it without that. For some sense in my mind, offense is the creative end of the court, and defense is the tough-minded, physical, connected end of the court. And that's kind of, I'm sure there are fundamentals in every business that you want to put in a higher priority than some others.
Yeah, that's a concept I talk about. You really only have a few slots in your employees' brains. Our brains, they can't have instant access to 100 different ideas. You only have 3 or 4 slots that are reserved for you as the manager or the leader in the organization. And you need to know what those slots are, what's the most important thing to put in those slots. I think that's very important.
I think there are things that are unnegotiable in my leadership. And I make that very clear to the players, mostly in individual meetings, and then gradually into the group. That, I'm not going to be a happy camper when you turn the ball over or take a bad shot or take a selfish action. Another thing is bring negative energy to the group. I don't like vampire energy. What is it called? Vampire guys that are
Energy vampire.
Suck the energy out of a room.
Right.
I can't handle that at all. So I'm big in every day. I think in basketball, you try to wake up, finding the positives, kind of correct the negatives, and celebrate the opportunity.
In terms of you worked in a situation where there was an owner who wasn't necessarily an expert in basketball. They typically made their money in some other endeavor or engaged in something else. I'm sure you have a lot of opinions on how selecting a coach. What are the key things that an owner should look for in a coach, and what are maybe the things that people look for that really aren't that particularly valuable?
Wow, I could get in trouble with this one. The game is changing. 25 years ago, when they hired a coach, the coach had a lot of authority. He had a big room that he had control over. That's changing today. You got a lot of people that have an opinion on basketball. Not only the owner, but you have analytics. You have physical therapists. You have doctors. You have weight guys. You have nutrition guys. You have load management guys that are telling you that this guy worked too hard yesterday. He's got to take today off. I never had those guys, and I didn't handle them very well. The old saying of there's too many cooks in the kitchen. I think that happens a lot in today's world of the NBA. And so I think it also is probably happening a lot in business. The amount of information that we have, I think it's great to have that information, but you got to be careful because information is to make you better. If information is shutting you down and closing people away from each other, I think you got to be careful of your boardroom or your meeting room having too many opinions and too much chaos and too much distraction.
So a modern coach would be very different than somebody from 25 years ago. The same people probably wouldn't be successful today. Is that your opinion?
No, that's not my opinion. I still think old school works. But I think old school guys like 70-year-old coaches like Greg Popovich, Mike D'Antoni is around 70. There's probably one or two other old guys hanging around out there. Rick Carlisle is about my age. So there's still guys doing it. But I think those guys have learned that they got to be open to the information and the changes that money has brought to the game of basketball. It went from $1 million business to $1 billion business. So we have more people that are more interested in what we're doing and how we're doing it. A big thing in the NBA today is basically the culture of your gym and of your weight room and of your organization of trying to make it a learning place, because so many teams in the league now are going young. The league is as young as it's ever been. I think you have more and more teams that have players under 25 than over 25. And because of that, you got to be a teacher. NBA is now into the process of developing their own players. And the process that happened in Philly where they lost for like 5 years and now they're supposed to be really good. Some owners buy that one. I don't buy that one. I think old school can be transformed into new school. My son is a new school coach and I'm an old school coach. We argue a lot, but I think we help each other a lot. Learn that the game is always changing and business is probably always changing. And you got to be aware and focused in on how to get better every day.
From a learning perspective, what were the major events in your career where you really felt like you made a level up in your learning about how to lead an organization?
I think the first time was when I was a freshman in college. I had back surgery. And so I couldn't practice. I couldn't practice for 6 months. And in that 6 months, the coaching staff of Carolina, Dean Smith, Bill Guthridge, and John Lotz, they started to kind of groom me to go to the film room and learn what coaches do. And that was an awakening to me. I'm not saying I liked it, but I was intrigued by watching video. I was intrigued by studying statistics. I was intrigued by scouting reports on your opponent. And I think that was my very beginning, that I thought I might want to be a coach someday. And then I think the other situations was I befriended Don Nelson, Del Harris, and Rick Majerus. And those three guys early in my career held my hand a lot. And they took me to a lot of coaching clinics, but not the ones you pay for, but the kind of the ones behind the scenes. And then Coach Smith had a clinic. And so I was surrounded with really, really smart, talented basketball people. And my ego got in the way a lot early in my career, but at times I had the ability to shut my mouth and listen, because I think listening is a tremendous trait. I wish I got it earlier in my life than I did regularly, but I think listening and learning is much, much more in my part of my personality now than it was when I was 35.
I'm curious what you think. I once talked to Spike Dykes, who was the famous Texas Tech football coach, about, how much is the coach and how much is the players. The NBA certainly is known as a, talent-driven league. And, if you've got Michael Jordan on your team, you're going to be pretty good no matter how good the coach is. He equated, he said about 75% was the players, and maybe a coach could make that, 25% difference. How do you think about that?
I'd probably give coaching a little more credit in the NBA because we play so many games. We play 100 games a year. To win a championship, you're going to play about 120 games a year. And because of that, you have impact on more occasions to have a bigger impact. I've always said that a coach shouldn't be paid as a star player, but I think he should be paid as a starting player. I think he's one of the top 5 or 6 guys in making the job happen. Not as important as your best player, probably not as important as your best 2 or 3 players. But after that, a good coach and his ability to connect and communicate and motivate and inspire and lift and keep a team together over 6 months of winning and losing and traveling and injuries, contracts, and BS in the newspaper. There's a lot of outside your circle of your basketball family. You have a lot of distraction, a lot of noise. And a good coach knows how to keep that noise quiet and not in his locker room.
Now, when you started your coaching career, the travel, we weren't flying. I don't think people were flying chartered jets everywhere. There were probably a lot of bus trips. I mean, describe your first coaching job. I think you were in your 30s. What did the time on the road look like there compared to what it looks like now in the NBA?
Today we got unbelievable. The stuff they have in the NBA today is everybody. But the travel was a factor back in the old days. I mean, you had 4 games in 5 nights. You were flying commercial. A lot of times you had a flight that was canceled. I remember running through the Chicago O'Hare Airport to try to find, players and try to even get to a game on time. I mean, there were a couple times driving into a game at 6 o'clock without. You get off the plane and you go right to the game because of travel. But now today's travel, basically we have all these divisions that were set up based upon travel. Now, my belief is everybody should be in the same conference and we should take the top best teams. And rather than having divisions, I think we should just have more of an open schedule because travel is luxurious now. 5-star hotels, $150 a day per diem. Masseuse, we can get massages in our room. It's NBA players, I promise you, are pretty damn spoiled.
I can imagine. You mentioned, changes to the game. Any other changes? I've thought the court's too small for the modern player. That, boy, I'd love it if they could widen out the court and maybe create some room underneath the basket. The 3-point shot certainly changed the game dramatically. I don't know if that's for the good or better. What would you, if you were king for a day, what would you change in the modern game?
I'm really worried about the 3-point shot. I don't know the answer to my worry. Some people are saying we're gonna move the line back a little bit and take out the corner 3. That would help the defensive end of the court. As a coach, if I didn't cover the corner 3, I think I have a better chance of covering the 3 ball. But right now, everybody's kind of playing the same way, and it's going away from, maybe the old school skills of post-ups and power basketball. The big man is losing its influence, and the guy that can make shots, that's the one thing right now that everybody's trying to find more of. So I think in 5 or 10 years, the 3-point line is going to have to be addressed. I don't think you're going to see the court get bigger because the arenas, I don't think, have the ability to adjust.
Yeah.
I think right now the players are just getting bigger, faster, stronger. I mean, I know all my old school buddies think that we were better than the guys today. I think they're a little wacko.
Yes.
I think today's player is so much better than I was. And I don't even, but players now, I'm just amazed at the intensity of making 3-point shots. 5 years ago, I thought there might have been 5 or 10 really good 3-point shooters. Now there's 50, maybe 70. And it's only going to get more and more because, this year we had 2 rookies who were drafted out of college make 6 threes in their first game of playing basketball. That didn't happen before.
Right.
So guys coming out of college understand the 3 ball. And a lot of guys are really becoming masters of it.
When you talk about guys coming out of college, obviously the draft is so important in professional sports, and the NBA, maybe the most relevant draft of any of the professional sports. There's always been this debate, best athlete, best player, best fit. After your career, how do you look at that, weighing those various characteristics of a player?
The game of basketball is going athletic. It's going to length. We like long, athletic players more than maybe big, bulky, slow players. And I think the game is going to speed. You can play the game up and down the court faster because it's easier to play before the defense gets set. So in that sense, I want the best athlete. I like him to be about 6'9". And I like him to be able to shoot. And I want him to be a good passer too. And I'll work on the defensive end of the court. I'll get him to play defense. But I think you're going to see more 6'8", 6'9" guys that can play any position on the court except maybe being a shot blocker underneath the basket.
What has you excited now? What are you doing that you're obviously talking to some companies, talking to sports teams? What has you excited these days?
I got some interesting things going on. I do a podcast. I have a kind of a podcast company of different people. My son's in it. We do something in Seattle called Simply Seattle, and now we're going to change it to Iconic Seattle. Trying to get the Seattle Supersonics back to Seattle. And I think we're going to get that done. I've run into some people about doing some documentaries on basketball. A couple of the ideas I have is I played in the ABA. The ABA merged with the NBA in 1976. And I don't think the ABA gets any love from the NBA. And so I would like to do a focal point on that time in our career, in our life, because I think there's some racism in there. I think it was a turbulent time in our country in the early 70s with the Vietnam War and the protests that we had going on, Black Panthers and a lot of crazy stuff with white-black relations. And I'm kind of falling into things like that. Then I might have to go out in the wilderness and try to become a movie director.
Oh,
But, I'm always involved with the gym. I mentor my coaches. I hang out in the gym as much as I can. I like talking to kids, trying to find their path, trying to find their passion a little bit. I'm retired, but I'm still fairly damn busy. I don't have a lot of lazy days.
what are you trying to, what's the number one lesson you try to teach coaches? What do you find they're most maybe missing early in their careers?
I think 90% of all leaders and all coaches overcoach and overlead. And I think it's a very important part of understanding the talents of the people you're coaching, and build your structure around their strengths and not your strengths, because they're the ones that got to perform for you. And so connection, communication, constantly trying to figure out how you can have a culture of getting better and smarter and learning, always on almost a daily or at least a weekly basis of, hey, we're good, but we gotta keep working. We gotta get better. And my big thing is connection and positivity, because in basketball, if you win 50 games, you're a champion. I mean, you're a great coach. But in that season, you also lose 32 games.
Right.
So learning to evolve in the process of positivity, but also correction. Because in the NBA, you can't keep making the same mistakes. You got to hide your mistakes, magnify your strengths.
Well, I think that's a great point. This has been a very high content podcast. So I'll turn it back to Sharif here to close this out.
Thank you, Joel, and thank you, George. And sorry, guys, for the little camera movement to get me back in here. I have one question before I let you go, and I think a lot of people who are registered for this webinar are going to watch the recording, so I don't see a lot of questions coming up. But I heard you earlier, George, talk about group flow, and I'm wondering how as a CEO or as a head coach you think about group flow. It's okay, we got some dogs in here, no worries.
Got 4 dogs in here. Well, flow has become a very hot subject. One of my mentors, or right now a friend of mine that I have gotten to be very close with, is Stephen Kotler, who's in the mental flow. Most of flow, and we just recently, the guy that discovered flow just died. The guy with the 32 letter name, I can't pronounce it. But I got into flow because I think I know how to get to flow a little bit. I think it's going to be a bigger part that if we learn how to train a lot of people spend a lot of money on training their bodies to be in good shape. You can actually train your brain to get in better shape. And flow is a part of that. But group flow doesn't have a lot of scientists studying it because of distractions. Group flow has too many distractions to really get scientific about what you have to do and what stimulates what in your mind. But I'm a big believer that in time, we're going to figure out group flow, because group flow is the most intense flow that we can be a part of. when a group of people get together and connect and attack and solve problems of their business, it makes everybody feel really, really good. So I think Stephen Kotler just read a book called The Art of the Impossible. I recommend it to anybody that really wants to go about trying to figure out about individual flow. And I'm still looking for the guy that's going to tell me about group flow, because as a basketball coach, that's what you want. You want your team to feel connected, to feel powerful because they're together.
That's good stuff.
It's an awesome answer. And one of the things we're trying to do at American CEO, I just have to say, is in our group meetings with CEOs, not only to teach them how to deliver predictable performance, but also to get that feeling of group flow with the peers together. So on that note, thank you, George, for your time. Thank you, Joel, for your time. And I will circle back with everyone in a couple of weeks, and those that are registered.